All right, and there we are. We are back. This is Entertainment Thursday right here on Good Morning Kenya. Thank you for staying with us. We get into this conversation that we have been looking forward to having, as we are having one of our very own from right here on KBC, broadcasting house, but he's from the other side of the broadcasting house. That is the radio side, the English service side, and he is the one and only Hainga Okwemba. He is the producer, there he goes, he is the producer and the host of the Book Cafe. He is an award-winning journalist, by the way, print and broadcast journalist. He is a writer, he is an essayist. Do you say essayist? Essayist? So that they don't think we're saying atheist. We're not saying atheist. Essayist, yes, essay, not atheist, essayist. Yes, he writes essays. And he's also a travel log writer. He does a lot of things when it comes to matters, media, print and broadcast media. He does all of that. And he's here with us today. And I'll allow him to introduce himself to you guys, get to talk to you. What's up, Hainga? How are you doing this morning?
I'm great, Vivian. Thank you so much for inviting me on Channel 1 and Mike Migwi. Thank you very, very much. It's quite some time since I sat in this studio. That's just number one. And then number two, I'm always on the other side where you are seated.
You're always the one asking people questions.
And I don't know why it's so foreign for journalists when it comes to being asked questions.
Yes.
Find it a little bit weird because we are used to asking questions.
That's very true.
But karibu sana.
Asante. I'm shaken because I'm used to being the one grilling people.
Get ready, get ready. Do we have that sound? Because we're about to grill you. Anyway, we just want to get to understand your journey, or the journey that you've had to go through, until this point in time where you are seated where you are right now as an award-winning print and broadcast journalist. We just want to understand how that came by, came along for you all these years.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vivian. Sometimes there are things that happen in your life, but you, at that time or at that moment, it's not, you can never tell that they are leading you to some destination. But for me, as a writer, I think I loved reading when I was a kid, and I was lucky enough to come when there were those ones who had already gone before me. And so what that meant was that I was able to benefit from books that had been read before by those ones who came before me. So I read children's books as a young boy. I remember both English and Kiswahili. I remember reading The Hare and the Jackal, or Sungura na Kakambwea. I remember reading Hekaya za Abunwasi, Tales of Abunwasi or something. I remember reading The Arabian Nights, the children's version of that very popular literature book. And so as a little kid, I read children's stories that I would come across. In school, somebody would actually come with a book, and all of us would actually be fighting to read that book. And then when I went to high school, more profoundly, when I was going to high school, I remember I was going to a good school. And the present or the gift that my father gave me at that time was a book by this famous South African writer, Alex Laguma, In the Fog of the Season's End. Now, this is a very complex novel because it's, Alex Laguma was very much in the throes of the anti-apartheid freedom struggle. And he used his pen first as a journalist and then as a writer to actually advocate for, to fight for the to be involved in the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. You can imagine a standard 8 boy have not yet even gone to Form 1 in that intervening period between after just sitting your standard 8 and awaiting to go to Form 1. So my father gave me that book, In the Fog of the Season's End. I don't remember actually completing reading that book.
Yeah.
But it's a book that I carried during those Christmas holidays and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I go to high school. And my high school we had a good library. And during the first holidays, the April holiday, we were allowed to go and borrow a book that you would go and read at home. And I remember wandering into the library and looking for a book that I would read, and stumbling on Elechi Amadi's The Concubine. As a young boy in those teen years, I think the title is actually what drove me to pick that book, The Concubine. But then it turned out to be one of the most fascinating, one of the most profound books and destiny shapers in my life. Because I remember when I went with that book, so those days I would actually spend some times in the village in Kakamega, and then I would come to Nairobi. So I remember reading that book when I was in Kakamega, and the book is so well written. And I remember telling my mother one afternoon that, Mom, one day when I think I'm going to write like this writer. And my mother looked at me, she, just encouragingly, she said, okay, if you have to do that, then you have to read and work very hard.
Yeah.
So that was the first time, just uttering that sentence, that one day I would want to write like Elechi Amadi, the author of The Concubine. Because at that time I believed, or I thought, that writing in essence is just describing things the way you see them. Because Elechi Amadi was actually describing that life in the village that was so real. People that you could actually touch, that you could feel. And you feel, come on. So all this writing, you mean it's just, if I can describe this environment and the people I'm seeing, that's what writing is all about. Then I can
become a writer.
It's like painting a picture to the audience through words.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, Elechi Amadi is very effective in doing that in that book, The Concubine. So I think those were the very first impressions of me actually walking towards a writing career. But of course, in high school, anybody who has gone through the Kenyan education system, you know that in high school, Form 1, Form 2, you are introduced to literature text. And so I was a beneficiary also of great teachers of English and literature. All
right, so your love for books began quite early, as you've mentioned. It began while you were still very young in primary school. And, just from the story that you've told us, as you're giving us your life story in connection with books, you had people who were encouraging you, in that, you had your dad buying you, this book. You had, your mom encouraging you after you mentioned that you would want to become a writer. You had, good teachers, as you've mentioned. So you've always had people who are, encouraging you to keep at it, so that truly means a lot, right?
Yes. Yeah, actually, if you look at even if you are looking at trying to understand the history of Kenyan or African literature, although we say that writing is a very personal thing, that you do it on your own, but it also helps when you find yourself in a community or around people who can incite you, who can actually push you, so that it comes out. And I learned this one time. We went to a school with my colleagues, writers at a writers organization called PEN, the PEN Kenya chapter of PEN International. PEN International is the oldest writers association that was founded in 1921 in London. And so it has centers or chapters across the world. So I was very much involved in that caucus of writers here in Kenya. And once in a while, we'd actually organize creative writing workshops and go to schools for these mentorship programs. Now, responding to your question. And sometimes I would actually find myself actually being asked to put together the program. And one time we went to a school, and I remember inviting Professor C.J. Odhiambo. I was with Professor Chris Wanjala, Smita Smith, and Tony Mochama, Jacob Okech, and wonderful Kenyan writers Alex and Deritu, and then we put a program together, and we had topics that Hainga, you are going to discuss this with the students. Vivian, this is your topic. Mike, this is your topic.
Yes.
So I remember us giving Professor C.J. Odhiambo of Moi University to just underscore that point. What is the importance of creative writing, having a creative writing session with secondary school students? And he made a statement that actually solved, for me, one of the biggest debates in the literary space, that whether writers are born or they are created. Okay? And he simply said that writers are born. If I was to actually interpret exactly what he said, that writers are born. So you show that interest as a little kid, it is inherent. It is in you. But then if you do not find yourself in an environment where people can notice and continue to encourage and push you to come out, continue to provoke, to incite you, then it dies.
Indeed.
Okay? But if you have good friends, you have good teachers, you have parents who are buying you books, and then so they continue inciting you, provoking you and pushing you, then it comes out. So writers, because you cannot go into a village somewhere and say that, oh, this Madare does not have many writers, and elect a group of characters there and say that you want to make them writers. It must come
from within.
From within. But then you go there as Vivian, as Mike, as Hainga, now to continue encourage and to continue inciting this young boy or girl who is interested in writing. And then it flourishes, it blossoms. It's,
yes. You know, you are very versatile as a writer, because you're into poetry, you also write columns. I'm looking at one literary postcard here, one you wrote about nurturing writing talent in Kenya. What inspires you in terms of, especially when you are writing poetry?
Yes.
How do you compose a poem? What inspires you? What is that journey like?
Yeah, you know, poetry is something, it's very arresting. It is something that, of course, any piece of writing comes from observation, from memory, from interaction. You've traveled, experiences out there. But then you'd come across something that is very striking, and as a writer, and you are arrested, you feel like you have to speak, you have to say something. So if you don't, you keep on postponing it, it continue actually bothering you until that moment that you sit down, you pick a pen and write. Because writing actually is that moment when you pick a pen and start, you know, putting things on that blank space. Okay? The moment you sit down and say that I want to fill this blank space with something, that is the essence of writing. For me, the experiences that I've had, it could be that I've had a conversation with somebody and there was something within that conversation that was very striking, that reminds me of something, and then I sit down and want to compose a poem on that. It could be something coming out of politics. Okay? Someone has done something that is great that you want to celebrate, or something that is very upsetting, and you want to respond to that. Because writing, again, what is writing after all? Many people would say, like I say, that writing is just describing stuff. But when you are writing from a position of consciousness, you say that writing is a response. You are responding to something. But it was put so well by this famous Egyptian professor of political science, Professor Fichere. Professor Fichere, I was in Cairo at a writers' conference, and he came to give a keynote address, and he said that what is writing? Writing is an act of protest. Writing is an act of rebellion. Okay? And you come to think of it, and you begin to understand that yes, this meaning in that statement that after all, writing is an act of protest, or writing is an act of rebellion. And you look at some of our four runners in this space, Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Chinua Achebe, Elechi Amadi, Alex Laguma, people that I've just spoken about. And you understand that when Chinua Achebe was writing, or when Ngugi wa Thiong'o was writing, they were just writing beautiful pieces of literature. But actually what they were doing, they were trying to respond to what the whites or Europeans had actually written about Africa. This denigration of the African as subhuman or something. So there were many of those early writers from the continent were actually trying to paint a different picture of Africa as a continent and Africans, and giving them a soul, that we are human. You remember that famous book, Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, that actually creates Africans as subhuman. Okay? So you have, or even you have this writer, she was called, this British woman, she was called Hannah Tracy. When Chinua Achebe first published Things Fall Apart, and she was reviewing that book, and you can imagine this is one of the most significant texts to have come from an African, from the African continent. But you have this person describing it as 3 cheers for mere anarchy. Okay? How would you expect somebody like Hainga, who is now an inheritor of Chinua Achebe, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Chris Wanjala, to respond to something like that? So I have to pick from that tradition and know my place as an African, and then as a writer. So writing, yes, you write beautiful things, yes, but writing is an act of protest.
Okay.
Okay.
Well explained. Well explained for sure.
I think we should take a short break, then we come back, because you need to tell us anecdotes from your travelogue writing. You've interacted with some of the best writers within Africa. I think we need to hear from that, but we are going to hear about it when we come from this short break.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Good Morning Kenya. This is Entertainment Thursday. We are having a conversation with Hainga Okwemba, who is a writer, also a radio producer and a radio presenter. You know, you've interacted with many writers within Africa.
Yes.
Most notable ones. What are the stories from these writers? Because you are a well-traveled writer. Take us through that.
Yeah, there are many. There are many. Actually, some of those fed themselves into the program, the Books Cafe program that I produce and present. But there are also the ingredient that actually fed the literary postcard. The literary postcard was a column that I did for several years in the newspaper, penning a column every week, and it was all about writing books and my travels. Now, there are many that I can actually talk about, but let me talk about one. There was one time I was actually in Egypt. I had actually been invited, I think it was the second Cairo International Conference for African Writers, and I had been to Egypt before. And so we had these wonderful conversations.
You are in Egypt here?
Yeah, that is Egypt. That is that gentleman is called one of the greatest Egyptian poets, Zain el-Abidin Fawad.
Okay.
So Zain el-Abidin Fawad, that great Egyptian poet, was actually chairing a session one time, and the session was almost coming to an end. Okay, but then just before he concluded, there was an Egyptian professor who made a statement about African writing that did not sit very well with me. And I thought that we could not leave that hall without me responding to that. He had actually said that there are many things that are happening on the African continent but then he does not see many of those actually finding space in African writing. And I thought that that was not very true, because even if you read my poetry book, Smiles in Pathos and other poems, you'll find a poem there that was actually inspired by what was happening in Darfur, in Sudan at that time. So it was not very true for him to claim that Africans, we are shying away from writing about things that are happening on the continent. So I said that I was going to respond to that. So I raised my hand, and Zain had almost ended the conversation, but he saw me, and because I had interviewed him, not in Cairo, in his home outside of Cairo, so he had become friends. So he said that, Hainga, what is it? Is it a burning question? I said that yes, the great poet, and he allowed me. And so I responded to that and say that that is not very true. Africans are writing, and they are writing about their experiences on the continent. But then I made references to two books. One by a Nigerian writer called Abidemi Sanusi, who I had interviewed and had read her book called Ayo. Okay, it's about this young girl who is actually taken from the continent, and then she's taken to Britain, and then her life is messed up. And then I had also read another Nigerian writer called Chika Onigwe, who wrote this book called On Black Sisters Street. It's a book about the trafficking of young African girls, beautiful girls from the continent to Europe, where they get there and then they are turned into sex slaves or forced prostitution. And when I made, so why was I actually mentioning Chika Onigwe's On Black Sister Street? Because Chika Onigwe, in that book, she makes a case that one of the ways that some of these girls actually are trafficked from the continent is that they'll come to you and say that, oh, you live in this part of Africa, there's no hope, and you're educated, we can get you to Europe and get you a good job. But you see, for us to get you there, let's say you come from South Sudan, where we've had this civil war and stuff. So they give you a story. They say that we are going to help you to get to Europe, but this is the story when you get to the immigration people.
This is what you should
This is
tell
what you,
them.
you should tell them. So there was one that, so like for example, making reference, you say that, oh, I come from South Sudan. I saw when militias came in my village, murdered everybody, raped everybody. I just survived by luck, and I was able to be educated. But as you can see, there's no life here. So if you help me, I'll be very grateful. So you give that story, and then the guys who are supposed to process your residency permit, they know, oh, this is one of them. Yeah? They don't. Okay, so you leave that place, you are so crushed, and then they come to you and say, come on, what is the problem? You're already in Europe. Okay? Yeah, relax. We are going to take care of you. After some time, they give you those skimpy dresses and tell you,
And then they get you into prostitution.
you have to pay back. So when I said that, there was this Nigerian writer, diplomat, ambassador former Akabogu Chinuba. She was there, and she was looking at me, and she became very teary. And so after that, she came to me, and after my response, to show that, no, we are writing about the continent. So she came to me, and she said, Hainga, do you mind giving me your room number? Was my room number? So I jotted, so I gave her, and then she jotted it down, and then she just left. So we went for lunch, and that afternoon I had actually planned an interview for the Books Cafe. You know, I produce programs even when I travel. So I'd planned an interview with a South African professor, Professor Sabelo and Lovu Gatsheni. So I was in the middle of interviewing the South African professor when the telephone rang, and I gave Professor Ndlovu the recorder, and I told him, Prof, just continue responding to this. Let me go and pick that phone. So when I went, the receptionist said that, "Is that Hainga?" I said, "Yes." And she said that we have a parcel from the ambassador for you. So I went, after the interview, I went and collected the parcel. And in that parcel, there were 2 books. One was a novel called Merchants of Flesh. And then the other book was a poetry book called African Romance. That why do African men still go out there looking for women when they already have a beautiful woman somewhere? They say that, so the ambassador makes a point there. She said that, okay, they always say that, oh, we are out there looking for the lost rib.
We are running out of time.
Yes.
And I don't want us to finish without speaking about that nice looking award that is sitting pretty on that shelf right next to you. So if you can hold it and talk to us about it, what was the accolade for?
This is an award that I was awarded by the Kenya Publishers Association. It was very humbling, and it was just for them actually trying to say that, Hainga, let us say thank you for what you've done for us as a nation and as a continent. Because throughout my travels and writing, I've really tried to document stories of writers and scholars than many people of my generation or in our history. So much so that today, if you go into the archives, our archives here at KBC, we have one of the richest and rarest archives of writers and scholars and intellectuals. So that was one. The other one was actually just, again, my writing, that I've done that both as the producer and the presenter of the Books Cafe, but also as a writer, that just trying to document stories for, from the continent. And so the award was actually to recognize my contribution in the promotion and preservation of literature and culture.
Very well deserved, because you do that so well. You preserve literature so nicely, and we want to appreciate you for that. I mean, that award already appreciates you, but allow us to also just appreciate you for that as well. We need to be finishing, but I would love for you to also touch on, Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o the late, may his soul rest in peace, being inducted into the Hall of Fame. What does that mean?
Yeah, on the day that I was being feted by the Kenya Publishers Association, and the Kenya Publishers Association are actually the administrators of Kenya's 2 big literature prizes, the Jomo Kenyatta Prize for Literature.
Let me interrupt you, Kidogo. I'm told that we have a link from KICC to studio. Kainga Okwemba, we were talking about Ngugi wa Thiong'o being inducted into the Hall of Fame. If you may quickly finish on that.
Yeah, Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o is actually the patriarch. We describe him as the patriarch of Kenyan literature because he was the first one to actually publish a complete novel, a full novel. There are writers who had been there before him. Hadambia Salache, the Kenyan writer who is buried in London, Jonathan Kariara, a great poet, those 2. But Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o becomes the patriarch of our literature because, one, he actually published that first novel. He was the first one to publish a complete novel, but he then remained a writer throughout his career. So for him to be inducted posthumously in that Hall of Fame by the Kenya Publishers Association, I think it's a very big statement. And what I would love to have a conversation with the Kenya Publishers Association that, yes, it was wonderful for us to begin with the patriarch of Kenyan literature, Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o. But then what that does, it actually opens doors for other great Kenyan writers, posthumous, Grace Ogot, the matriarch, Professor Chris Wanjala, even those that I've just mentioned. So I think it was a great thing out of the visionary of the leadership at the Kenya Publishers Association.
All right.
Great.
Okay. There's this thing I want us. It's a notion, or should I call it an assumption, that I would love you to speak on. I don't know if you would demystify it or agree to it. Most people say that Africans do not read, and you know, narrowing it down to Kenya, people are saying that Kenyans do not read. Is this just an assumption, or from a writer's perspective and from someone who's big on literature and you understand that side, you know, that field well?
Yes, yes.
Is that the case?
No, that is something that I would very easily debunk, that Africans read. What is at question is, what do they read? But they read. I'll give you an example. You know, Nairobi is actually one of the most vibrant literary hubs in the world.
Yes.
Okay? Many literature events happening every day, book launches, and you go to those spaces, there are great Kenyans who are coming for those events. You organize, the other time we organized a book launch on a Tuesday at Alliance, and it was full. Yeah. So Kenyans read, and you have them actually having conversations about texts that they have read. So I think it's, you know, it reminds me of this statement that was made sometimes back by this South Sudanese poet and scholar, Professor Taban Loliong, when he made that statement sometimes in the 1960s, that East Africa is a literary barrenness. So you'll have some very lazy reporters, every time they met Professor Taban Loliong, that was the question that they would ask him, the prof. You say that
very lazy
journalist. Because as soon as when he made that statement, it was valid. Because at that point, it was only Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o who had actually written a novel, and then there were people who were writing poetry. So he did not have a lot. That was in the 1960s. But even then, it was actually debunked at that very moment by Okot Pabitek. Okay? When he said that, what is your understanding of literature? Okay? So he debunked that statement that no, East Africa is not a literary barrenness. Professor Chris Wanjala, the great Kenya's foremost literary critic, debunked that statement many years ago when he wrote his book, Seasons of Harvest. Yeah? So it's the same thing, that those who actually make this statement about Kenyans not reading or this reading culture, they don't understand what is happening in the literary scene. What I can only say is that the younger generations, our teens who are coming, there are so many distractions that are now, you know, they are growing up. Our generations was different. But now you have these gadgets that are very destructive. So if you have a parent or a guardian who still encourage the youngsters at home to read, people read. We can't, it's not a statement that I can actually agree.
And now there are more options. There's the audiobooks if you don't want to actually read the hard copy. So I know there's that feel of the book that is quite something, you know, but there's the audiobooks that people can get to read via, you know, through listening, but you're still reading the book. There's the ebooks that are now available. So the options are there for, you know, wider options on matters reading. So thank you for demystifying that and for debunking it, that we are actually reading. Mike?
Maybe as we close, is there a poem you would read to the audience, or
let's finish with a poem.
Do you have one?
But there's a poem that I'm going to read.
In the least time possible, because tunataka kwenda upande ule mwingine. 30 seconds.
And it actually responds to your question about how my writing comes. So this is the poem. It's called A Social Masquerade. It appears in my book, Smiles in Pathos, and other poems. So you lack in purpose, yet you inflict a presence. That we write in poetic prose to effect a pro-essence. You, amazing gladiator, dressed in white frock, strumming the guitar, enjoy entertaining the flock. We shall not burn calories for a damp art, we assert, for you have erased its glories. Enough of that live concert. You, a philosopher of mob thinking, masquerade of social empathy, we indict you for Africa's thinking. A continent contaminated in apathy. Those whose jam your performance cannot write in their language, this endemic is abated with silence, while a continental flag is hoisted to gauge. Years of massive plunder and exploitation, the gestation of a communique for restitution, the G8 at Scotland will accept a petition, but for Africa's own plunder and inaction. This was a poem that I wrote. The inspiration came from the G8 meeting in Scotland. Yeah, so that's how I write my poetry. My writing.
We thank you for making time to even come talk about your work and what you also do on radio.
Thank you very much, my brother Mike Migwi, and my sister Vivian Ndegwa.
Thank you. It was a pleasure having you. So the book cafe goes on air on Saturdays?
Yeah, every Saturday after the bulletin at 1:10.
All right. Yeah. There you have it. If you want to get to have a listen of what Haemba does on the book cafe, you can catch it on English service every Saturday at 1:10. 1:10 p.m. Yes, at 1:10 p.m. Right about now, are we heading over to
not right
KICC?
now, but we shall be heading over to KICC